Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background, I originally gave this presentation, or one very similar to it, at the Micro Focus Universe event in Monaco in March. And the idea of it was to tell a story of how Lloyds Banking Group has been adapting how it does testing now that we've adopted a lot more DevOps techniques. It describes some of the difficulties that we face as testers and how we're overcoming those difficulties, some of the improvements we've made and some of the things that we are still aiming to do. So in view of the fact that we've got a large audience, I'll explain a little about Lloyds Banking Group. A lot of you won't be UK based, so you may not have heard about us, but we're the UK's largest financial services group. We go back over 300 years based on mergers of various precursor banks effectively, and we've 25 million personal customers and 5 million business customers, so we're obviously a large organisation. So this presentation describes how an old, established and traditional institution has adopted the more modern concept of DevOps and agile working. And one of the first difficulties that we faced was trying to introduce DevOps to a very traditional IT audience. So it's not very easy to summarize what DevOps is. And the green screenshot that you can see in the middle of that slide is basically a video that we've used internally to try and explain what DevOps is to traditional IT people. And one of the quotes in that video is, if you ask 100 people to define what DevOps is, you'll get 100 different answers. And all of these answers are right or wrong, depending on your perspective. And there isn't really a formally defined standard, but what we can agree is that DevOps is using more modern techniques to do more work more quickly and with fewer errors than before. And I think that's a generally agreed concept. And the way that we do that is by introducing automation wherever possible, increasing collaboration between different teams and so on. And one of the things about DevOps is it's popular in startups. So, you know, small teams who work in very agile, flexible ways, you know, have been doing this for some time, and it works. And so the question that we had to face was, how do we get it to work in a large organization? And there's various ways that we can do it. You split the various IT groups into smaller teams, maybe co-locate people, but you can then end up with 2 or 3 teams all going off and trying to integrate 2 tools or do something in a clever new way. And that's duplication of effort. So one of the things that we found is that knowledge transfer between those teams is vital. And so knowledge transfer and sharing became something that we really had to focus on. And I think the other thing that we've had to remember is that DevOps isn't all about tools. If you go to a DevOps conference or event of some sort, all you'll hear people talking about is tools, you know, Jenkins and Gherkin and Puppet and Chef and all sorts of things. And, you know, you'll have a lot of people pushing open source and all those kind of things. And that plays a part, but it's not about the tools. It's about the culture and how you can change that to allow people to take ownership as they would in a small team. And the benefits that we've found through adopting DevOps are they all come from better collaboration. And there isn't really one magical tool that will fix all of your problems. And I think that's one of the things that you need to be aware of if you're starting on a DevOps journey. So there's a couple of images here that show some slides that I'll go into a bit more detail on later on. One of the things that we've done in terms of introducing DevOps to traditional IT is overcoming objections. There's people who say, well, you know, we're happy doing things the way we always have done. And we need to remind them why that's not necessarily the best way. And I think it's quite easy to do that when you work with people to say, you know, where are your pain points? What are your difficulties? And try and use automation or clever use of tools to take away some of those pain points. One of the other things that we've done is run a lot of pilot projects. And as we've done those pilot projects, we've then recorded video demos and things like that and shared them on our intranet. And we've also made a lot of use of effectively internal cloud environments where we can spin up a server, do something experimentally, and then throw it away. And so being able to do that kind of thing has let people try things that they perhaps might not have done in more traditional IT environments. As I mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of knowledge sharing. So we have these lunch talks and sessions where we travel around the country and go to different parts to make sure that lots of different people get opportunities to get together and basically chew the fat. And that's the type of thing that we're trying to do with SIG talks at Vivid as well. The idea is that people sharing experiences is a very good way of helping other people build knowledge and feel empowered to try things experimentally. This next slide shows one of those experiments, basically, where I was asked whether or not it might be possible to test a series of APIs for the bank, and there was a team that was basically going through lots of different APIs and tweaking and improving their performance, and they found that they were using functional test tools. SOAP UI was one of them, and they were also using a framework called Rest Assured, which works in IntelliJ, to test REST API calls. And one of the things that I did as part of that was work out how to record what they were already doing in SOAP UI and IntelliJ to create load runner scripts that means that we could then hit those APIs pretty hard and run automated performance tests as part of each build. And so every time new code goes into an environment, you can run a performance test and make sure that whatever you've done to change the API, you've not made its performance worse. And that way we're making incremental performance changes with every release. Okay, so one of the slides that you saw a sneak preview of earlier is this one, where basically you take what looks like a standard project. Now, this is a made-up project. It doesn't actually exist, and a lot of these, some of the tools that are on there we do use, but not for every build. But effectively, what you've got is a complex process where you start off gathering requirements, then you deploy code to a development environment. You build a development environment, you check in code, review it, and then deploy it and test it and all those different things. And one of the things that you'll find in any large organization is that in every handover between different teams or different environments, there's an opportunity for a delay to creep in. So every time someone has to manually press a button and kick off a test or deploy some code or whatever, there's an opportunity for delay because someone has to ring someone in a different area or send them an email, and that in itself can cause a delay. And also, if one of those steps goes wrong, you may well have to go back to the start and start the whole process again. So one of the things that we're trying to do is not necessarily take away these potential points of failure, but get to them much more quickly so that you find the errors sooner and you can fix them more quickly, and then go back to doing what you're meant to be doing, which in this case is testing or performance tuning or whatever. And this is another slide. It's a simpler version that basically shows the benefit of taking testing from the end of a test life cycle or development and test life cycle, and doing it throughout the process. And it shows that rather than queuing up a series of 4 or 5 changes into one large test and then running your tests, it's better to run a smaller number of incremental tests and try and free up some time at the end of the test life cycle. Okay, so just before I move into my demo, this is an animation that I created to basically give you the idea of what you can do in terms of automation. So if you've gone through the sort of slides that I've shown before and you've educated a team that it's a good idea to start automation and start potentially using a tool like Jenkins to pull together lots of different types of tests. One of the things that we've done is sort of demonstrated that it's possible to pull lots of different tools together using something like Jenkins. And in this demo, we demoed each of these individual components like code deployments, code validation, functional tests, performance tests. And one of the roles of the team that I work in is going out and helping people integrate all these tools together, proving that it can be done, and then leaving them to go off and do it for themselves. So in this example, we've got a Jenkins server in the middle of the screen, and at the start, it's basically sitting there and talking to a Git repository, so a code repository. And that's all it's doing. It's just constantly sitting and waiting to see if there's anything for it to do. So when a developer does a code commit into Git, Jenkins picks that up because it's constantly polling, realizes that code has been committed into the repository, and so it knows that the next thing it needs to do is run a deployment. So in this case, it calls urban code, pushes that deployment out to a test environment, and once that's happened successfully, Jenkins is aware of it, and it knows that the next thing to do is a regression test. So we use various tools for regression testing. There's teams who use Selenium and other open source frameworks. We've obviously got a lot of people using UFT as well. So Jenkins can then call UFT directly and run a test and pull the results back into Jenkins itself, or alternatively, it could call ALM and run a test that way. That's more something that's in Chris's area of expertise. So when we get to questions around that, then I may lean on him. But so once the regression tests are passed, you can then potentially say, all right, we can run a performance test. So there may be another step here where potentially code's deployed into a performance test environment, or maybe not. But once a performance test runs, the results come back to Performance Center, or you can use LoadRunner for this too. And then Jenkins takes those test results, puts them in the Jenkins dashboard, so both the developer who made the commit that started the whole process off, as well as the tester who writes and maintains the scripts and looks at performance over time, both of those have visibility of how things have run. So I don't know whether anyone has any questions at this stage, because I'm about to run a video which shows a demo of me doing this for real within one of our test environments. Someone said they like this slide. Where's the like button? So thank you for that. Well, in the absence of other questions, I'll move on to the video. So, okay. So just to talk you through this is a demo that I recorded in February for the presentation in March, but it's all still valid. This is the screen that you get when you've installed Jenkins. In this case, I've got Jenkins installed on one of these cloud servers that effectively is a throwaway server that I mentioned earlier. So I've installed Jenkins, and I've installed a plugin called the HP Automation Tools plugin. I think it's been renamed to HPE Automation Tools, and soon I'm sure it'll be renamed to Micro Focus. But sorry, I'll just go back a little bit. On the left-hand side, you've got all the things for managing Jenkins, adding people, and so on. Down in the bottom left-hand corner, you've got a list of the places where jobs can run. And on the right, you've got a series of jobs. So we've got tests that can run in LoadRunner or Performance Center or whatever. This next tab shows another one of my demo servers. It's very much not a banking application. This is Magento, which is an open source e-commerce shopping cart application. And the reason I've chosen this for use inside the bank, there are several reasons. One of them is data protection, and this is obviously made up data. It's a dummy application, so there's no issues with that. But it's also very difficult to script in both LoadRunner and UFT. And so it's a really great tool to set up in an environment and then train people to use your testing tools. So looking into this job here, you can see I've got a pipeline job, which is one of those jobs that runs sequentially. I've called it Magento. And further down, you can see the script here says, at the first stage, I want you to do a URL check. The second stage, I want you to run a UFT test. Third, run load runner, and so on. So what will happen is it will check that the site is up. Assuming it's up, it'll run a UFT functional test. Assuming that passes, it'll run a load runner, and so on. So looking at the URL check, that's the URL that it's going to go to. It's just an internal server name. And it will check that that's up and running. It'll then run a UFT script, which does a search for I think it searches for a shirt or something along those lines. It does a search, and it will run on a machine which I've labeled, as you can see there, that says UFT 14. So I've got Jenkins slave agents, which some have load runner installed on them and some have UFT on them. So this is the first of those slave agents. It's a UFT one. As you can see, there's a little Java agent running, and there's a series of scripts in a folder called Jenkins. And basically, this is the other one, the other machine I've got. This is the load runner one. You can see from the icons. It's got a load runner scenario as well as a load runner script. So I can run a script to prove it works, or I could run a more complex scenario. So if I say, okay, I'm going to run this, click build now, the first thing it does is the quick URL check. So that proves that the Magento site is there and responds. And the next thing it does is it's going to kick off a UFT test. It takes a while to wait for this. It's always, even though it's a recording, I'm always nervous that it's not actually going to happen. So the slave agent sitting here, when it receives a call from Jenkins, it runs the command line that starts off a UFT test. As you can see, it runs pretty quickly. It just does a search for a shirt, so only takes, as you can see, less than a minute to run. Once these tests have run, the Jenkins plugins pull the test results back from where they've executed and store them in Jenkins. You can go a step further than that, and you could push those results into ALM, for example, if you wanted to. But you can see here, it's a standard UFT result set. You can see the page it went to, that it clicked search and so on. And that's pulled back to Jenkins. And obviously, because the UFT test was successful, the pipeline script has gone on, and it's now running a load runner test. You can see that the first load runner test, which was, as I say, literally just running a script, has already run. That's the sort of thing you might run to make sure that your scripts functionally work still after a change in code, for example. I've sped this step up because it takes about 5 minutes, I think, to run this test. But so it's run a standard load runner test. One of the things that you have to do is set service levels within your test so that Jenkins knows whether something has passed or failed. Once it's finished, as I say, it pulls the test results back. And as you can see, you've got what looks like a standard load runner result set pulled back and visible in Jenkins. You also get this trend report, which is really useful because it shows you that for each build or each time you run the test, it stores the average transaction response times. So you can see in this example, I can't quite remember what happened with build 16 and 17, but the response times were really slow for those. So if this was for real, rather than just my test environment, those are the two builds that you wouldn't have pushed into production. And just for completeness, this is it's also integrated with Performance Center in this case. And you can see that I've gone into the Performance Center itself, so you can see the test run. So test run 197 is running live in Performance Center in this video recording. And those of you who were sharper-eyed on the earlier screen would have seen that that Run 197, it's there down at the bottom of the screen, is the one that's just been kicked off by Jenkins. So I've used this as an example of what is possible to promote the use of automated functional testing, automated code deployments, and then driving into automated performance tests. And this is one of the ways that I've promoted its use internally within LLOYDS. So one of the things that I've done by setting up this type of environment is really just demonstrate to people what is possible. And then you can encourage them to go off and try these things in their own applications with our support. So that's the way that we've managed to get more people adopting these DevOps principles within the test cycle. So I haven't seen any questions pop up, but now would be a good time if you have any before I think of handing over to Chris. There's a lot of you online, but you all seem to be staying quiet. Okay, I'll close that down, and I'll get ready for Chris. Chris is going to discuss one of the ways that you can prepare for functional test automation within a continuous integration environment. So I'll hand over to you, Chris. Feel free to ask any questions that you might have thought of, and I'll likewise chip in if I think of any in your part of the presentation.
Oh, fantastic, Richard. Thank you very much. And actually, we do have some questions coming in. Maybe let's take a moment and answer one or two of them, just as it's appropriate, considering you just did your demo.
Okay.
Do you want to take a minute and field those? That way, while things are still fresh in their minds?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. That's right. Okay, fine. I hadn't clicked. I was looking in the wrong panel to see where the questions were being asked. So right. Okay, there's a few questions. The first one is, what plugins are required for Performance Center to integrate with Jenkins? Basically, for that, you just need the HP Automation Tools plugin, which what I'll do is I'll show you where you'd find that. So
yeah, while you're bringing that up, Richard, I was actually doing some research to see the latest, greatest on it. And the HP Automation Tools plugin now supports direct UFT, UFT from ALM, direct LeanFT or LeanFT from ALM, integration with StormRunner Functional, integration with ALM Octane and ALM.net, integration with LoadRunner Performance Center and Mobile Center. So pretty much all of their products, whether it's direct integration with a functional or performance tool or via the, I guess you'd say, administrative component, which might be ALM. You know, they have grown this quite a bit and made it so that if you are a traditional HPE Micro Focus shop, you know, Jenkins is a way to go that can really, really help you out. And it makes it pretty easy. You know, one thing that I appreciate with this plugin is that not only do you get the results that you're looking for as a tester, but someone that's very CI-centric or DevOps-centric or a developer is also going to get the integration with their tool like Jenkins to have it trigger that a build was good or bad. You also get the integration with the times, as you saw in the pipelines, and it's really fairly simple to get rolling.
Yeah, one of the things that we've got working is if a test fails, we can log a defect in Jira, because that's what the developers like to look at. But we could also potentially log one in ALM, because that's where the testers typically look for defects. So we can do all those kind of things. Yeah, so in answer to the question around which plugin is it, it's this one here, HPE Application Automation Tools. Version 5.4 is quite new. I think my demo was done with 5.3 or possibly 5.2. The people who are developing this plugin are primarily based at what was HP R&D in Israel, but is the Micro Focus R&D team, and they're very responsive. If you raise any defects or questions or on their GitHub pages, they come straight back to you. So that's one thing that's worth knowing. So yeah, you just need that that plugin. Someone's asked, does Jenkins use its own built-in reports or just report what other tools post back? Effectively, it just reports what other tools post back. But there are some clever things you can do with Jenkins. So, for example, you could do lots of conditional type reports. So, if a report comes back and it's a pass, fine, send us a flag. If it comes back and it's a fail, roll back a deployment or something, something like that, or raise a defect. And there's a lot of intelligence you can put into it. One of the other things that I've seen demoed, but I've not done a lot of yet, is using a tool like ALM Octane, which can report on these types of tests. You can run a Jenkins pipeline through Octane and get more visibility into it through that. And it's very much a modular thing. So Jenkins by default will present the reports that you give it, but it is possible to write really clever frameworks that go off and do other things. Someone's asked, if something in the test fails, does it stop the pipeline? Yes, the answer to that is yes. I'm not sure whether that's visible in my video, but I will see if I can see it there. I'll go back to video demo, and so here. I'll just pause it at the appropriate point. Is it about there? Yeah, effectively each of those stages are conditional. So yeah, this point here, I'll just let it get to the right bit. So what you would see, and I can't scroll on this because it's a recording, but if this one, for example, had failed at the UFT script, that would be green. This one would be red, and each of these steps 3, 4, and 5 would be grayed out. So yes, each step is conditional. But that's great because it gives you immediate feedback about where it's failed, and you can then click on the you hover over this area and download the logs and see what it was that made it fail. So that was that. Yeah, there are quite a few questions. Sorry, if you use one pipeline job to kick off another 5, could you export results from all 5 back to your test management tool, ALM or Octane? Yes, you can. So good question. I think I've kind of covered that. Can you only call VUGen from Jenkins? No, you can call just about anything from Jenkins. So with the HP Automation Tools plugin, natively you can call VUGen or load runner controller and tell it to run a scenario session, or Performance Center if you want to do performance type tests. You could also do UFT or Lean FT for functional tests using that same plugin. But you can also run things like PowerShell scripts or anything that runs as a batch file or anything that runs as a command line you can run. So there's lots of plugins. So Jenkins will do a lot more than I'm demonstrating here. It says, would it be overkill to use this plugin to only push test results to ALM? Is there a more lightweight alternative? Not quite sure I understand that question. Possibly. It might be overkill, but again, if all your results need to be stored in ALM for audit purposes or reporting or something like that, as is often the case in large regulated organizations, then you may want to put it there because that's the single version of the truth. That's where everything is held. But yeah,
if I could add to that, Richard.
Yeah, sorry, go on. Yep.
I was going to say, to add to your thought on being able to store results, I think if we understand that question right, it would if you have the desire to have your results in ALM as well, as long as you trigger the test via ALM as opposed to directly kicking off the UFT test, it will manage sending your results to ALM as well as Jenkins. So Jenkins will actually read live from ALM as opposed to some temp file. So for that regard, it really depends thinking through your process and determining where do you need your results at the end of the day. If you only need them to contribute to the pipeline, you can go direct UFT. If you need to have them in both places, you can certainly do it that way. If you're just looking to ship results from ALM, so you have them in a central place, you may or may not want to have it another way. But one thing that we've found with integrating with something like Jenkins is that you put the control of automation in a lot more folks' hands by opening it up through Jenkins. So that's one food for thought to add to that.
Yeah, we've got a couple more questions, Chris, which I'll go through quickly. Somebody's asked whether or not this works with Storm and Load as well as Performance Center and Load Runner. The answer to that's yes. So that's a quick one. And the final question is, if the code is being deployed to multiple test environments, would you have multiple pipelines, or can Jenkins handle this in one? The answer to that is probably quite complex. You could do it either way. You could either have a very large Jenkins job that builds in one environment, runs some tests there, and then builds in another and does some tests there. In theory, you could have something that deploys into, pre-production, assuming it works, deploys into production. So you could go all the way to, final deployments into a live environment if you chose to do so. Most big organizations are a bit risk averse about that kind of thing, particularly regulated industries like those that Chris and I work in, health and finance. But yeah, you can make it as complex as you want, but I would just say it's probably better to have a larger number of smaller, less complex things than one really big one, because then it's easy to fix and maintain. And then one more question that literally just came in. Actually, Chris, you may have answered that by email, but
that's okay. I can
someone says,
cover it.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, you speak to that, and then I can hand over to you. So, okay.
Sure. So someone else was asking is, how do you kick off the test in ALM from Jenkins? Actually, this plugin is a really versatile plugin, and you can configure the Jenkins plugin to communicate with your ALM. I've never tried to have it communicate to multiple ALMs, so don't ask me that part. But when you tell it to talk to ALM, you basically tell it where your test set lives. So think if you're running your test direct from ALM today, you tell it where your test set lives. I believe it's by the folder path, so / wherever it is. And you can also set any ALM Lab Manager prerequisites and run it from Jenkins. It's really quite cool. I didn't expect it to work as well, but it's nice. And as I mentioned a moment ago, it's kind of neat because folks that may not have had the ability to do stuff in ALM based on availability, plugins, permissions, whatever, you actually can open that up to them in Jenkins if you wanted to. So hopefully that helped out.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. That's probably a good warm-up for you to start your part of it as well. I think we've covered all the questions today. If we haven't, by all means, people, just drop them into the chat window, and we'll do what we can to answer them online. So
yeah, keep the questions coming in.
Yep,
please.
And I'll keep driving the slides, Chris. So let me know when you want to advance.